Great opportunity to catch up here with Asher Mendelsohn. First time in team history, the technical director of the club. Asher, thank you for coming on.
Glenn, thanks for having me.
We're going to track you down eventually. We know how hard you've been working on a lot of different things. Let's go right into nelsonquinones. Let's get this started in a big way. Tell us a little bit about him, the target. I saw something you tweeted out about him trying to help with a playoff push. Tell us about nelsonquinones, how you acquired him.
Yeah, Nelson's he's an exciting young player. As we've talked about quite a bit, we view the future of Houston as being a pathway for talented young South American, Central American players to progress their careers, come to Houston, do well here, and then go on and try to play in the highest leagues in the world. The reality is nobody bats 1,000 at doing that. Right. There's going to be, but what you want to do is you want to have a higher yield than everybody else. And you want to be seen as a destination for players who can come here and have some success stories. Now, with Nelson, what we really liked about him was how proactive he is. When he entered the game, and for Once Caldas, the senior level, despite being a teenager, he's going into the game with the mindset of, I'm trying to win this game for my team. And that's something that we really liked. We really think will apply well to this league in terms of his athleticism, his ability to take players on 1v1, his ability to run behind defenses. It's something that we think will help our team. We think it'll help us in our results in the short term, but we also think he's a player that has potential to grow. Now, as I mentioned earlier, not every player reaches their full potential, right? And you can look at some of the guys we brought in. Some of them have done very well with us. Some of them have not done as well. And that's the nature of what we're trying to do. And the younger they are, the less predictable their outcomes or their translation is going to be. But with Nelson, I'll tell you, sitting down across the table from him in Manizales, Colombia, the thing that struck me about him was his maturity and his intensity. When I talked to him about what we were trying to do and why we were interested in him, and you look in his eyes, he's not, there's a seriousness to him that really resonated with me. It really made me feel very good about bringing him in and what he would do with the opportunity once he's here.
Everything I've read and seen about him is that he's a penetrator. He's aggressive, like you mentioned, not necessarily the finished product as a goal scorer. Is that something you feel like you can nurture out of him if he comes to this environment?
That's absolutely the idea. The idea is that we're bringing him in either to score goals or to create goals. And, from that position, the idea is getting behind the last line is that you're either going to goal or you're going, or you're setting up your teammates. And so I think those are both areas of his game that he can work on. And he's not unique in that and at his age and where he is in his career progression. But no, that's something that we think he can develop in while he's here.
He's technical director, Asher Mendelsohn of the Houston Dynamo. We're talking about the new signing, nelsonquinones. All right. So going back to him, a lot of the things you just told us here was from meeting him in person, eye test. How much data work did you do? Because, I do know data validates a lot of things. What kind of data work did you do on him, or did you even need to do a lot?
Yeah, it's harder to do very deep data work on young players who haven't played a lot, right? Because the sample size is very low, and so so we didn't do a very deep dive on him on the data, to be candid. With him it was more, we did a lot of video work on him, and then it's the behavioral screen, and that to me is, in my role, here at the club and in previous roles, when we skip that step, when you skip the step from sitting at a table with someone, looking across, looking them in the eyes, is when I've made the biggest mistakes of player signings. And so it was important to go down there and meet with him face to face before finalizing this deal.
Asher Mendelsohn joining us. By the way, nobody expects you to hit on everything. Not everybody can be Liverpool. We all know that. So, I think that's the reality. I think sometimes fans forget that you don't hit on everything. That said, to get the best out of Hector Herrera, do you believe you have to get two better attacking pieces in front of him? And I mean definitive pieces, not a 19-year-old that might be a little bit more of a project, but guys that are full-blown pro, you know. And I'm going to use Sebastian Driussi as an example, which is not an easy guy to find. He's been absolutely remarkable, as you know. But he is definitely a fulcrum, and he stepped in and has made it happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jerisi's done a great job in Austin, and Austin's done a great job in terms of what they built over 2 years. But what's interesting is when you look at when Jerisi came into Austin, his first, 6 or 7 games, the results weren't going their way. Now that's, and when I say that, that's not on Jerisi. That's not my point. But my point is,
he came in the summer, to be fair.
Yeah, he came into the summer, and it wasn't until the last kind of 5-6 games of the season when the results started turning. In fact, it was the LA game on national TV was when it really started to click and the results started to turn. So even with a player as talented and as effective in this league as Jerisi, even with him, it took 6-7 games for the results to start turning for the club. And so, and he's the ultimate success story, right? I mean, if you point to right now, because he's, leading scorer in the league, the team's doing incredibly well, I'm very.
And I didn't mean to make that the example. I was really more about, do you need to get the best out of Hector Herrera? Do you need two better pieces in front of him? Because I almost feel like Hector's being asked to do too much.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's been a lot of responsibility put on Hector very quickly. And the reality is this was never going to be a quick build, at the club. It's not about bringing in one player. It's not about changing, one technical staff member. It's not about creating one new position. There's a lot of work that needs to be done at the club to get us to where we want to go. Now, to answer your question, I think we do need to put some better pieces around Hector. I think that will help. I think, when we started off this season, we knew we had a limited number of moves we could make in terms of roster spots and budget. We made a priority on bringing in experience along our spine, which, when you look at Steve Clark and Daniel Stairs and Hector and Sebastian for less experience, but still a significant investment in a high quality player. We made very conscious choices about where we were going to use our limited number of arrows for this year. Would we like to continue adding and building on that? Of course. And, will we anticipate doing that as this team continues to evolve? Absolutely. And I think all those pieces will help in terms of, how the team is doing and also, in terms of Hector's influence on the games.
I say this respectfully. Did you find this deeper down competitively than maybe you might have thought when you first inherited the role?
I make a habit of going after hard projects with good people.
Okay.
And so
I can read something into that answer.
I expected this to be difficult. Now, when you and I sat down at the beginning of the year, I think I told you, I said, our goal is to make the playoffs. And I'm going to tell you for next year, our goal is to make the playoffs, right? Like, you're not in this business unless you're trying to make the playoffs every year. And when we're not, we're disappointed. And, and we have to hold our hand up and say, we're all accountable to the fact that we haven't done that this year, that we're off the pace to do that this year. And we have a lot of ground to make up in order to get back on that pace. And we have to look at, why is that? Some of that's process, and, do we have the right process in place? Some of that's execution. Are we executing what we want at the level that we want to? And so, we're looking at both, we're looking at this pretty aggressively to say, how do we get off pace? And then what are the things we need to get back on pace?
Asher Mendelsohn, technical director of the Houston Dynamo, joining us. I asked this to Pat, and I'll say this again: players get conditioned mentally over long periods of time where maybe the bar's not high enough. Do you see guys on this roster that you just say, for their benefit, for our benefit, they need a change currently?
I mean, I think I'll answer the question this way, which is, when we made the MLS Cup final in 2015, one of the lessons learned in
This is
2016
Columbus. This is
in
Columbus.
Columbus. Yeah. When I was in
I just
Columbus,
want to make sure the listener knows.
absolutely. And we made the MLS Cup final in 2015. We brought everybody back in 2016. And that was the only year we were there, we didn't make the playoffs. And, even in success in this league, I think one of the lessons from that is that you need to have some turnover, and for the benefit of the group. And so I go in with that operating principle of, every offseason, there should be some turnover, whether you're doing well or whether you're not doing well, right? There needs to be some new blood injected into a group. It makes it more competitive. It also helps to create, some new life, bring new life into a project. So I think that'll be the case for us, just like it was when we came off a successful year, in 2015 in Columbus.
Data in the modern game. How much data is needed? Do you think we ever go overboard with the whole data thing? How do you find the balance? Because you just spoke to me about Quinones, and one of the big determining factors was literally talking with him face to face. Where do we stop with this? Because I think it's going in a really deep direction for a lot of different reasons. A lot of it's commercial as well, as we know, in gambling. I mean, I just looked at a stat on the MLS website. I have no idea what it is. Successful launch. I have absolutely, it sounds like NASA's sending a ship into space. I got no idea what it is. Except for maybe just a clearance. I don't know. But, where do you draw the line on that? Because you're in the decision-making position.
Yeah. I mean, I think data is a tool. And, if you're running a club, it's a tool that everybody needs. Like, I don't think anyone at this point can say, I'm going to build a house and I don't need any screwdrivers, but at the same time, you try to build a house and all you have is a screwdriver, it's not going to work either. And so I think it's a very important tool in the process, both to evaluate how the team is doing, understanding, are things process oriented or execution oriented, right? So are we generating enough expected goals? Okay, well then our process is probably pretty good. Do our actual goals match our expected goals? If the answer is no, then our execution needs to get better, right? So I think it helps to inform that process. I think it also helps in terms of finding players is it's a very challenging, but also a very exciting part of what we do, in that our market for players is way bigger than the market for NFL players is, or the market for baseball players are, or the market for basketball players are, because there's so many competitive leagues around the world that are, and MLS is in that broader ecosystem, versus being at the top of it, where there's only a limited number of players who can ever play in the NBA. Just like, or the equivalent would be there's only a limited number of players in the world who could play, at Liverpool. And so, the pool of players you're trying to identify from, it's very difficult to track. And so data can be incredibly helpful to make that universe smaller. And then when you're making a final decision on players, on a small number of players, to help supplement what the eye can see, what the scouts can see, and to say, okay, are we truly taking a holistic view of this player? Are we accounting all the weaknesses, and are we aware of all the weaknesses? And the answer may be yes. I mean, the data may say someone's weak at a particular, at a particular metric, but when the eye test goes back and looks at it, it says, well, actually, here are good explanations for that. So again, I think it's one more way to look at making this, or one more way to look at problems that allow you to make more informed decisions. I think if you over rely on it, I think you'll end up, you could end up making mistakes, but if you don't use it at all, you'll also end up making mistakes.
How much data goes into picking a starting lineup for Paulo Nagamura? I think this is a good question.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that's a question for Paulo. I mean, I'll let Paulo answer that one because, from the beginning, Pat and I, we both, our coach picks our lineups. And our coach is the one and we give him autonomy to do that. And, he has access to data that he uses and he references. But at the end of the day, he's the one who makes that call, and how much he's using the data versus how much he's using his eye versus how much he's using his going back and looking at video from training or video from previous games. Paulo is really the only one who can answer that fairly.
Do you worry that data can become a fallback position? I hear coaches now talking about expected goals, and I see people writing articles that I'm wondering if they even watched the game and had their own opinion on the game, and they're layering in all these expected goals and all this data. And I find it almost maybe intimidating to the fan because it's so over the top sometimes. And I think sometimes people use it in a way to say, hey, look how knowledgeable I am. Look at all this data I can toss at you. So where do where is that line?
It's a great question. I mean, I think, in a very funny way, some people can go down that rabbit hole with tactics, right? And they can talk about, they can use all the jargon, and they can make graphics, take screenshots and post them on articles.
I can't even get through these articles these days. There's
And
too many graphs.
and not use anything on data and say this the whole game's about tactics, and then forget that there's a human element to this as well, right? And so I think one of the beautiful things about our game is that there's lots of different ways to look at it. I mean, it's very much it's the most democratic sport you can think of in the world, in the sense of you could be almost any shape or size and play and find a position on the field. It doesn't take a lot of money to play. There's a lot of human judgment involved. Like, you look at all the controversy around refereeing, there's so many human elements to the game. And just like the real world, there's different people take this very complex thing that's happening, which is the game, and they look at it from their own worldview, and their worldview might be data related. It might be psychology related. It might be tactically related. And nobody's completely right, and no one's completely wrong. They're all just different perspectives on to try to make sense out of this complicated thing that's happening. And, in the end is decided by maybe one action, which is the other beautiful thing about our game. In basketball, you can make a lot of mistakes. And
can I stop you there? Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
We're talking to Asher Mendelsohn. I just want to remind everybody, technical director of the Houston Dynamo. You said game changers, and absolutely, that blows data out of the water, is a guy that can just make a singular play, like Hector Herrera hitting that ball to Sebas Ferreira. I mean, a spectacular goal, a goal that could stand up in any league in the world. How many game changers do you guys need at this point?
I think that's a great question. I mean, if you ask any GM or any coach, they'd say we want more, more game changers we have.
Because you guys thought, obviously, going into this season, you had enough with Quintero. You thought you'd get enough out of your wide game. You found out differently. Let's be honest. Yeah. Right. I mean, there's data that can back that up, but all we had to do was watch games. The final third has been a problem. Paulo gets asked about it every week. He's working on movement and mobility, but at some point you just have to go to personnel, don't you?
I don't totally hold that worldview. I'm more of a believer that in the collective, and in that if you have a way that you play, the way that you play should generate chances and limit chances. And the players that you bring in that way that you play should, be asked to do things they're capable of. And if everyone's doing their role, then, we should have good outcomes. That's my worldview. Now, if you add a game changer into that, it helps, because it can cover, you can have a great way to play, but if you have somebody who can go, I mean, and the best example is Barcelona, right? If Guardiola has, back in Guardiola's era, he's got a great system of how he plays. He's asking players to do things they're highly capable and competent of, but it still helps to have Messi, right? It still helps to have a guy who can take, who can unlock a defense by himself. And so, how many game changers would we want? Of course, we want game changers in every position. Is that practical in a salary cap league like MLS? No, it's not, but what I would say is I don't think personnel alone will get us to where we want to get to, and that's, I think it has, for me, I look at what we're doing, and I want to focus more on our process and say, are we collectively creating the chances that we want to create? Not are we, how many more players can we go and sign that can solve problems themselves?
So it's a balance.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to Asher Mendelsohn, technical director of the Houston Dynamo, a guy like Sebastian Driussi, with as much, and I keep going back to him just because, I don't think he was, he didn't come in with the name of a Gareth Bale. He wasn't somebody everybody knew. including myself. I knew of his name. I had never watched him much. Um, but was that a guy that was on a list? Like, you guys are in Columbus. You guys got a list of players that you're tracking. I don't know how deep your data bank goes, but I'm sure it goes very deep. Was that guy on your list? I mean, was he kind of undiscovered, or was he something of a known quantity in MLS amongst all the clubs?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak of this secondhand because, to be fair, my time in Columbus ended in 2018, and then I was out, I was out of the program for a couple of years working for the league, and so I wasn't tracking the player pools as closely. And so a player like Druisi, when I was in Columbus, was a guy who who was still, I believe, in Argentina, had a very high upward trajectory, probably priced himself out of us looking at him, to be quite candid, when he was still in Argentina. When he had his career in Europe, obviously he was more attainable for an MLS club. At that point, a number of clubs were looking at him, so it wasn't, and Austin had the good sense to go and get him. And obviously that's worked out very well for them. But he isn't, I wouldn't position him as a guy that people weren't aware of, the teams weren't aware of. I think they were in a position where it was something they needed. It was something they could afford. They had the cap space for at that time, the roster spot for, and they acted before other teams that were in similar situations. And so credit to them for doing that.
Asher, one more to let you go, because I know you got a hard out here and you got to get to doing some other things other than talking to me. Just give us a state of the Dynamo right now from a ideology. We hear the word culture a lot. Give us the state of the Dynamo, maybe here in a Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a project that wasn't going to be built overnight, right? There's a number of infrastructure pieces that we're putting in place this year. We're excited to speak more about that in the coming months. We've made a lot of progress behind the scenes of, frankly, how do we improve our processes and the people involved in that, and we'll be able to share that shortly. So I think it's I'm excited about the direction we're heading. I'm very unhappy with the results we're getting. I'm very disappointed in the results that we're getting right now. But I think one thing that's very interesting that was a colleague told me when I came in here is, he said, you really don't know what you have until the pressure starts, until it's under pressure. And I think this period right now is telling us a lot about what we have. And because now the results, we have enough results. They're telling the story about how this season is going, and it's not going the way that we want. And so for us now, we get to evaluate a little more closely what we have, and so we can continue to build for next season and seasons beyond that. Because our intention here this isn't a 1-year project where we're coming in and saying, okay, we're making the playoffs this year or we're not, and we're going to throw everything away. It's more, we're building on kind of the initial ideology that we had of how we want to play. We want to be proactive. The values that we built values that we want to use when times are hard, and we are using them right now. Like accountability is a big one we talk about. We've talked about a lot this last month. I think I mentioned earlier in this conversation, being team first, having respect, and pursuing excellence, and those are things that, we're going to lean on more now in this period than ever, because this is when you need values and things aren't going well. We're going to keep putting the work in behind the scenes to keep putting the foundational pieces in place so that we can get to where we want to get to, and sustain success there. And that's this project. That's what we're trying. That's what we're working on. So.
This is one the fans I know would want me to ask. Are players playing for their jobs right now? Like you mentioned, the pressure's on now, or maybe it's not on. Honestly, it can be used in the other direction. The pressure may not be on because, look, you literally have to win 8 out of 9 games to put yourself pretty much in a playoff position if we're really being upfront here. So the pressure might not be on, but that also is something for you guys to really look at here. Are there guys that are literally over the next couple of games playing to either stay here or go?
I mean, I think when we talk about accountability, I wouldn't limit it just to players. I would say, anyone who's.
I mean, I'm focusing on the players right now.
I know you are, and I'm answering this and saying I think we're all accountable, and I think we should all be feeling pressure right now. Anyone who's involved in the results side of our business, You know, he should be feeling pressure right now, and should be demonstrating, you know, why next year isn't going to look like this year.
So can I ask you again, are players playing for jobs?
Yeah.
And listen,
Yeah.
I appreciate because you guys all have taken accountability. Paulo has, Pat has, you have, everybody who has a platform.
Mhm.
What about the players? Because they kick a
It
ball.
applies to the players. It applies to the players. It applies to the coaches. It applies to myself. It applies to Pat. So the players aren't removed from it. They're part of it. And so, yes, the answer is yes.
So when the combined intelligentsia of the competitive side of the team, you are looking at guys in the last 8 or 9 games saying he's going to have to do a little bit more for us to want him to stay around.
Mm-hmm. And just like Pat should be meeting with me and saying, if you don't have a good plan for how we're going to not repeat this next year, then why are you here? I mean, it applies to all of us. Like, and that's where, we're all in this boat together. But, in the end of the day, everyone's going to be held accountable to their responsibilities.
Absolutely love it. Asher, thank you for being so candid. Let's get you on again. That was the longest 15 minutes in history because I think we're probably pushing 25. Thank you very much for your time and
Thanks,
good
Len.
luck this weekend.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
All right. Good stuff there from technical director Asher Mendelsohn. We'll take a break here. Hey, LamontBrands.com. Get your Soccer Matters t-shirt. All proceeds go to the Snowdrop Foundation. 501c charity provides scholarships to cancer patients, awareness fundraising. By the way, this show is a platform for spreading pediatric cancer awareness. LamontBrands.com. We'll take a break.